The whole process is 1.5 seconds, that's it. That's the process of removing a nut, changing a wheel, and refitting the new nut. As a result of that, as I'm sure you can tell, the margin for error is very small. And if just the slightest problem happens, it slows the stop down, or potentially in an absolute disastrous case, this happens. So let's go through a little bit more detail about what the nuts are and why we use the systems we do. So our nuts are what called captive. They're maintained within the wheel and the tyre. So as the wheel comes off, the nut goes with it. And this is what our nuts look like. You can see this ridged area around here, and that's where the socket will connect into and effectively apply force. This is a brand new nut, so you can see there's no wear and it hasn't been on a race car yet. When the gun connects and it removes the nut such that the nut is now loose and the wheel comes off the car, this is what we would typically expect to see. So you can see some wear patterns now. Now the reason why is because this nut has to hold the wheel to the car such that it can cope with 5G forces in braking and laterally as well. It's a huge amount of force going through the axle and the nut, and clearly we can never have it coming loose. So the gun is an incredibly powerful gun, such that you can actually see the mechanics having to restrain themselves, hold themselves to the ground, otherwise they get rotated with it at the same time. It's an impact force. And what happens is the nut typically loosens in 4 or 5 impacts against it, a hammering action. Now what happened is we came on slightly angled. So when the socket was now connected to the nut, it was slightly angled relative to it. And as a result of that, now instead of distributing the load across all of the nut, it was across a small section. And that tore the metal clean off. And in fact, all of the metal was now removed from the nut. As a result of that, the nut was in place and we were unable to remove it. That's a brief overview of what happened. Clearly, it's a circumstance that cost Valtteri dearly and cost the team dearly, and one that we're going to put steps in place to mitigate.